obviously, the main thing that everybody's got on their mind right now is Ding Dong, the Mitch is dead. And while that's incredibly funny, all we know right now is that he's probably a vegetable. And while that means he's definitely the healthiest he's ever been in his life, that doesn't mean that he's actually out. And until that happens... Look, I'm sorry, I have no remorse for the guy who is responsible for so much legislation that fucked over my life and the life of many people around me, especially the fact that he's the guy who is almost single-handedly responsible for basically allowing the Supreme Court to be entirely on the Republican side. So, while yes... God, something, the tolerant left. At the same time, I feel like I'm entirely, completely justified in every opinion that I have about the guy. That said, we do have fan art to get to, and I think y'all will want to see it. This is Last Arts, and this is a one that I still don't understand. The Virgin Killer sweater on fire. I don't get it. The Virgin Killer sweater flame? I don't understand it. Can somebody in chat explain to me? Timer-kun returns to give Suris a very unwelcomed hug. Used a little reference from PJ Meadows, but I'm not good with face-forward shots. I still don't get it. I don't get it. Dragonic says, I stole this from a friend. Mitch McConnell is a rigor tortoise. But thank you, Last Arts. I appreciate it. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, the best ways to do so is to drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. Now, because we're not going to be talking about Mitch McConnell right now, I instead want to go ahead and talk about, well, okay, so I'm just curious. Have you ever talked to somebody who is rich? Like, actually rich. And their opinion of everybody who is not rich is that they are lazy. I'm pretty sure all of us have had that experience at least once, right? Like, not necessarily that all of us have been in proximity to somebody who's able to wipe their ass with dollar bills, but we've at least seen the stereotype of the person, right? Okay, so what if I told you that, you're about to watch that stereotype piss you off in real time?
To come here right now.
Some of these kids, and I call them kids because they're in their 20s, and they've never had real jobs, and they're complaining things are expensive. Yes. Okay, so first of all, can we talk about that statement? Can we talk about that statement just real quick? Real quick. Kids in their 20s, people in their 20s are not children. 29-year-olds are in their 20s, and they're not fucking children. That is 5 years younger than me. Fuck off. Like, in 5 different languages. Absolutely. No, none of that. But, okay, so can we just real quick talk about the fact that if you are in your 20s and you have a job, you have a real job. All jobs are real jobs. Every fucking job is a real job. If you work in a supermarket, that is a real job. If you work freelance, that is a real job. If you work on YouTube or Twitch, I promise you, my aching back and my mental health definitely understand this is a job. And also, by the way, if you ever talk to people who try to just like stream as a hobby versus people who stream as a job, you will see a very different mentality between the two, just in case you didn't know that. Every job that you possibly could have is a real job. Now, every job has a varying degree to which that job is difficult, and there are varying degrees at which that job is useful. I would argue that there are some jobs that are simply not fucking useful. Like, I don't know, CEO. Like, there's just some jobs that I don't think are necessarily required for functioning. But they're real jobs. Things are expensive when you don't have a real job.
No, things are expensive because the economy blows. Things like, okay, I make more money as a streamer than minimum wage. And minimum wage is what most people would consider the, like, not real job category. And affording things is a fucking struggle. I am currently sitting on a power bill that I am trying not to pay, and I am currently a month late on a medical bill. And I'm just sitting here trying to figure out, okay, well, when do I get to pay those? And I'm hoping that when my Twitch paycheck comes through, that it will be enough to cover those without me having to, you know, have to shuffle anything else around. And I make more than people do at minimum wage at these, quote, not real jobs. So if me and my situation has to shuffle finances around, then people who are in situations worse than me are likely having to figure out what to do when their check is definitely bouncing and they're getting a $30 surcharge on their account, because even though people don't use checks anymore, the idea of the bounced check causing you to lose a lot of money has never disappeared from banks and should be illegal.
Right.
Do you think that's getting traction, complaining?
Unfortunately, I do, because this generation, my generation, I hate to say it, Gen Z and those younger than me have...
My God, it is so weird to think of Karoline Leavitt as Gen Z. She has such fucking, like, boomer millennial energy, not Gen Z energy. But, okay, sure. I guess that's what happens when you have boot for breakfast.
Been raised with just silver spoons in their mouth, just getting everything handed to them.
I'm just curious, how many of you know a Gen Zer who has a silver spoon in their mouth? And I know I'm interrupting at, like, every sentence because so much of it is ludicrous, but just out of curiosity, how many of you know somebody who was born in Generation Z, so they would have been born probably to millennial parents, or, like, young Gen X parents? How many of those people had a silver spoon? Because I think the last generation that could have possibly had a silver spoon, like as a whole, would have been Gen X, because as the generation after the boomers, they got to benefit from an economy that millennials never got to see. And of course, Gen Z never got to see a good economy there either. And of course, Gen Alpha is going to be just kind of trying to figure out how to handle buying an Apple at this point. Sakura says, it is quite possible to skip an entire generation. So, like, just in general, while I can think of a handful of people who've been able to have the silver spoon experience, I have not seen that that is a unifying experience of my generational bracket, and I certainly don't think it's a unifying experience of Generation Z. In fact, I think their situation is worse than ours was as millennials. But I want you to notice something really interesting. Do you remember every those darn millennials thing that was on the internet from the 2010s all the way to like 2016? This is just that, spit polished and repurposed again.
That's not the values this country was built on. It was built on meritocracy and hard work, pulling up your sleeves, pulling yourself up from your bootstraps.
I'm curious, complaining about things and being just kind of upset about them is in fact what this country was built on, and I feel like it's very strange that you're not acknowledging that, Miss Leavitt. Let me explain. Pulling up your sleeves and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and all that shit that doesn't actually work, I'm just curious here. What do you think the American Revolution was? Because it wasn't pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. That's not what it was. And it most certainly was not grinning and bearing it. It wasn't that either. It wasn't pulling up your sleeves and just handling through it. No. It was complaining. It was bitching. It was pissing and moaning. It was not wanting the situation that we were under to be perpetuated and fucking changing it. That's what the American Revolution was, in broadest of strokes, ignoring everything else that happened with it, like, you know, the Trail of Tears and box blankets and all the other weird shit we did in the middle of all of that. And the fact that we needed the French for that, by the way, still kind of upset about that. Thanks for Claire Obscure, by the way. But realistically, we are not a country built on pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. We are a country that has been built on the idea of pissing, moaning, and whining to the point that we have developed the relationship with other people of being hyper-individualists because of the pissing and moaning and whining. When you piss and moan and whine, it's because you're not happy with the current situation, and then you try to do something to change that current situation as your next step. Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is not the same thing. Generally speaking, the world sucks but grin and bear it mentality of older generations that she's trying to infuse into the younger generations is completely counter to the idea of what America was built on. It is an anti-revolutionary mindset in every possible way, shape, and form.
And achieving the American dream, and we need to protect it with all we got.
Is it laziness?
A little bit.
Is it because the professor said country's corrupt, it's evil, and we just need to shake them down and hand money out?
It's laziness, and it's the liberal indoctrination. You bring up
the liberal indoctrination. It's lazy. Okay, hold on. I forgot. I forgot that Fox News has never gained a new guidebook for how to do their rhetoric. Never, ever, 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 ever have they changed jack shit, no matter who is actually in there. So, laziness. Can we talk about that phrase for a minute, like that word, real quick? Because what's the quote? Let me make sure that I've got it right. Laziness, technically, psychologically, it doesn't really exist, not in the way that you would normally think. Now, that does not mean that the word lazy does not have the utility and that we should not use it. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm going to pull up a paper from Devin Price, and we're going to read over a little bit of that today because I think that this is very emblematic of what I am trying to communicate to you. So, they start off by saying, I've been a psychology professor since 2012. In the past 6 years, I've witnessed students of all ages procrastinate on papers, skip presentation days. Why is there a share button on highlighting? Who is that for? It's so I can make a bad Facebook thing. It's a bad Facebook quote generator. Who is that for? That's for a different generation than me, I fucking swear. I've seen people procrastinate on papers, skip presentation days, miss assignments, and let due dates fly by. I've seen promising prospective grad students fail to get applications in on time. I've watched PhD candidates take months or years revising a single dissertation draft. I once had a student who enrolled in the same class of mine 2 semesters in a row and never turned in anything either time, but I don't think laziness was ever at fault. In fact, I don't believe laziness exists, and I don't believe that I can handle the cat meowing at me every single time I try to do literally anything. The nanosecond I try to exist as a person. They then go on to say, I'm a social psychologist. I am interested primarily in the situational and contextual factors that drive human behavior. Like the behavior that I'm about to engage in, where I'm going to grab this cat and place it on my computer so she shuts the fuck up. Do you see this face? Do you see this face? This is the face of stupid. This is the face of whining every time Dad has to do anything. She's not even being held, like, in any meaningful way. I'm just literally holding her. Like this. Just... Yeah, I know. I understand. Welcome to the top of the computer. Just be there. Not a thought in her head. Not even a little bit. There, you happy? You happy? Yeah, you're happy. You're happy. I can't stay upset at you. I can just be upset at you. Okay. I'm gonna sit down now, and you're gonna go to sleep, okay? Okay? Thanks, child. Yeah, no, smooth brain, not a single ridge. No ridge there at all. Absolutely not. Not even an outcropped vein. Not even the slightest thing. Anywho, they go on to say, when you're seeking to predict or explain a person's actions, looking at social norms and the person's context is usually a pretty safe bet. Situational constraints typically predict behavior far better than personality, intelligence, or individual level traits. So when I see a student failing to complete assignments, missing deadlines, or not delivering results in other aspects of life, I'm moved to ask, what are the situational factors that the student holding the student back? What needs are currently not being met? And when it comes to behavioral laziness, I'm especially moved to ask, what are the barriers to action that I can't see? There are always barriers. Recognizing those barriers and viewing them as legitimate is often the first step to breaking lazy behavior patterns. It's really helpful to respond to a person's ineffective behavior with curiosity rather than judgment. I learned this from a friend of mine, the writer and activist Kimberly Longifer, who publishes under the name Mick Everett. Kim is passionate about the acceptance and accommodation of disabled people and homeless people. Their writing about both subjects is some of the most illuminating, bias-busting work I've ever encountered. Part of this is because Kim is brilliant, but also because at various points in her life, Kim has been both disabled and homeless. Kim is the person who taught me that judging a homeless person for wanting to buy alcohol or cigarettes is utter folly. When you're homeless, the nights are cold, the world is unfriendly, and everything is painfully uncomfortable. Whether you're sleeping under a bridge, in a tent, or at a shelter, it's hard to rest easy. You're likely to have injuries or chronic conditions that bother you persistently, and little access to any medical care to deal with it. You probably don't even have much healthy food. In that chronically uncomfortable, overstimulating context, needing a drink or some cigarettes makes fucking sense. As Kim explained to me, if you're laying out in the freezing cold, drinking some alcohol may be the only way to warm up and get to sleep. If you're undernourished, a few smokes may be the only thing that kills the hunger pangs. And if you're dealing with all of this while also fighting an addiction, then yes, sometimes you just need to score whatever will make the withdrawal symptoms go away so that you can survive. Few people who haven't been homeless actually think this way. They want to moralize the decisions of poor people, perhaps to comfort themselves about the injustices of the world. For many, it's easier to think homeless people are, in part, responsible for their suffering than it is to acknowledge any situational factors. Nyay, thank you so much for the raid! How was your stream? What were you doing? We're making fun of some of the worst people in the country. And we're talking about how laziness isn't actually real right now. Said, oh my god, you said it right! Well, I assumed that on the anime side of the internet, there's enough people who are into horse girls that that's probably the way to pronounce it. Actually, realistically, I shot in the dark, but, you know, nobody's going to be able to make me play the horse girl game. I'm sorry. When you don't fully understand a person's context, what it feels like to be them every day, and all the small annoyances and major traumas that define their life, it's easy to impose abstract, rigid expectations on a person's behavior. All homeless people... Okay, so this is a quote that they are using for that. To elucidate that. All homeless people should put down the bottle and get to work. Never mind, most of them have mental health symptoms and physical ailments and are fighting constantly to be recognized as human. Never mind that they are unable to get a good night's rest or a nourishing meal for weeks or months on end. Never mind that even in my comfortable, easy life, I can't go a few days without craving a drink or making an irresponsible purchase. They have to do better. Yes, as we were continuing Steins Gate, but my head too small for the theories. It's 2 a.m. and I got work in a few hours, so I'll be here in spirit, sadly. Hey, thank you very much for sharing your community with me. I appreciate it greatly. Hopefully, you have a wonderful rest since you have work in the morning. I will take good care of your community. Probably. I cannot make as many promises as I wish because I do talk about terrible and horrible things on the internet. And this is one of those terrible and horrible things. So, y'all have been warned. Anywho, but they're already doing the best they can. Don't worry, I mistreat them enough. They'll take most abuse as an act of kindness. Oh, fair enough. They're already doing the best they can. I've known homeless people who worked full-time jobs and who devoted themselves to the care of other people in their communities. A lot of homeless people have to navigate bureaucracies constantly, interfacing with social workers, caseworkers, police officers, shelter staff, Medicaid staff, and a slew of charities, both well-meaning and condescending. It's a lot of fucking work to be homeless. And when a homeless person or per person runs out of steam and makes a bad decision, there's a damn good reason for it. If a person's behavior doesn't make sense to you, it's because you're missing part of their context. It's that simple. I'm so grateful to Kim and their writing for making me aware of this fact. No psychology class at any level taught me that. But now, that is a lens I have. I find myself applying it to all kinds of behaviors that are mistaken for signs of moral failure, and I've yet to find one that can't be explained or empathized with. Let's look at a sign of academic laziness that is anything but procrastination. People love to blame procrastinators for their behavior. Sylvie, thank you for gifting out a tier 1 sub to Stoff. Putting off work sure looks lazy to an untrained eye. Even the people who are actively doing the procrastinating can mistake their own behavior for laziness. You're supposed to be doing something and you're not doing it. That's a moral failure, right? That means you're weak-willed, unmotivated, lazy. For decades, psychological research has been able to explain procrastination as a functioning problem, not a consequence of laziness. When a person fails to begin a project that they care about, it's typically due to anxiety about their attempts not being good enough, confusion about what the first steps of the task are, not laziness. In fact, procrastination is more likely when the risk is meaningful and the individual cases about it, the individual cares about doing it well. When you're paralyzed with fear of failure, or you don't even know how to begin a massive, complicated undertaking, it's damn hard to get shit done. It has nothing to do with desire, motivation, or moral upstandingness. Procrastinators can will themselves to work for hours. They can sit in front of a blank document, doing nothing else, and torture themselves. They can pile on guilt again and again, and none of it makes initiating the tasks any easier. In fact, their desire to get the damn thing done may worsen the stress and make starting the task even harder. Yeah, I've had that one. Yeah. Anselin says, I'd rather not do something than do it wrong. So, I would rather do something and have it be wrong then not do something. Because doing something and having it be wrong means that I can then improve. Not doing something means I can never improve. But I'm also a person who succumbs to retail therapy. I'm also a person who succumbs to binge eating. I'm also a person who succumbs to staring at the screen for 2 hours on end, waiting for the click in my brain to tell me to start work. Sebi says, I'm big afraid of failing. Yeah, you need to fuck off with that. Every one of you, all of you, every single one. Every one of you who is afraid of failure needs to understand fundamentally that failure is simply the first task that you have to complete before you succeed. It is the first step of success, is to fail. You have to do something and do it wrong to understand how not to do it. If you understand how not to do something, you start eliminating the things that you shouldn't be doing. Eventually, you will be left with the correct things to be doing. Again and again and again and again. You need to be aware that failure is going to happen, and you need to be okay with it happening. And moreover, you need to be okay with it happening over and over and over again. You need to be okay with the wall being high and scaling it sucking. Sakura says that there's a Japanese saying, mistakes are the origin of success. Yes, exactly. 110%. Do the thing, do it wrong over and over again. Eventually, you will be left with the correct way to do it. It's fine. Sebi says, it's a work in progress. I understand that, but I am the kind of person who operates best when a fire is under my ass. So I tend to project that onto everybody else around me. I will put a fire under somebody's ass, because it usually works. The solution, instead, is to look at what's holding the procrastinator back. If anxiety is the major barrier, the procrastinator actually needs to walk away from whatever they're doing and engage in a relaxing activity. Being branded lazy by other people is likely to lead to the exact opposite behavior. Often, though, the barrier is that procrastinators have executive functioning challenges. They struggle to divide large responsibility into a series of discrete, specific, and ordered tasks. Here's an example of executive functioning in action. I completed my dissertation from proposal to data collection to final defense in a little over a year. I was able to write my dissertation easily and quickly because I knew that I had to compile research on the topic, then outline the paper, then schedule regular writing periods, and then chip away at the paper section by section, day by day, according to a schedule I had predetermined. Nobody had to teach me to slice up tasks like that, and nobody had to force me to adhere to my schedule. Accomplishing tasks like this is a consistent way that my autistic, analytical, hyper-focused brain works. Most people do not have that ease. They need an external structure to keep them writing. Regular writing group meetings with friends, for example, and deadlines by someone else. When faced with a major, massive project, most people want advice for how to divide it into smaller tasks and a timeline for completion. In order to track progress, most people require organizational tools such as a to-do list, calendar, datebook, or syllabus. Needing or benefiting from such things does not make you lazy. It just means you have needs. The more we embrace that, the more we can help people thrive. So, we're halfway through the entire thing, but you kind of get the idea. The point of it is that laziness as an actual metric that we use for judging people, and often judging them morally, isn't really consistent with how psychology functions. It's not really consistent with how the human brain is. It's not that a person is lazy and therefore they do not want to do a task. It is that their brain is prioritizing a different task, and there is often a root reason as to why. That root reason can be, like I said in the article, anxiety. That root reason can be fear. That root reason can be a lot of things. But oftentimes, what it is not is laziness. But we tend to judge people morally about laziness because it's easy to do so. We can look at all of the different things we've accomplished in life and then use that as a basis for us to not actually introspect and instead try to use ourselves as a measuring stick to tell other people that they don't measure up to us, ignoring all of the ways in which we don't measure up to other people in the process hypocritically. Anyway, back to the dumb bitch.
Up a great point about our education system. However, I will say a silver lining, so many parents that I talk to across the country are homeschooling, are turning to private education.
Okay, so here's another one that I want to hit on. Do you know why Republicans love homeschoolers? Because they're fucking stupid. Like, not really. That's not the real reason. But when you have a public education, you tend to have a very holistic education. Now, public education is not the greatest at what it does, but it tends to not have very many gaps by design. There's a reason that you have your math class, your English class, your writing class, your whichever classes you happen to have at the time, depending on the school that you're in. I'm sorry, I went to a private school, and then a magnet school, and then another magnet school. My entire schooling is all kinds of fucked up. I don't know what classes are supposed to look like. But I do know that the reason that we tend to have a lot of different structured classes is so that we can hit everything that a person might need. You know you're going to need math. You know you're going to need to know how to write. You know you're going to need to know a little bit about how history works because that's how you form a fucking moral basis for how you're going to work. You know you're going to need all that, so we make sure that you learn all of that. Now, do we do a good job of that? No. But when somebody is homeschooled, rather than having a standardized education that can sometimes be adapted to an individual, you instead get an individualized education that struggles to meet up to standards. As an example, you're in a public school and you're learning science. You're learning from a science teacher and they're telling you about how radiometric dating works. Let's say that you have a student in the exact same grade, but they are a homeschool student. The homeschooler is going to have to learn from someone, and that someone's going to have to be probably the parent. Let's ignore all the other problems that happen here, where if you are homeschooling, you're likely not working, and if you're likely not working, you're a single-income household in an economy that is rapidly devolving to where two-income households aren't even enough to handle most of the bills anymore. So let's ignore the fact that homeschooling's a fucking privilege, even if you have the ability to do it. Let's say that this person is privileged enough to do so, and you want them to learn about the age of the Earth. And you want to teach them radiometric dating. But the teacher is a young Earth creationist. And unlike a teacher in a school, where they will be held to a set of standards that they have to handle, the teacher is the kid's mom, and that kid's mom can say whatever fucking dumb shit she wants. She can say whatever the hell she wants. And it can be completely inaccurate. But she can say it. She can just tell them that the Earth is 6,000 years old, because that's what they believe. And who's gonna butt up against them on that one? Who's gonna do it? There's no system telling them not to, so there you are. And oh, by the way, if you want to say that this maybe doesn't work, or maybe doesn't happen, my private education was handled by a curriculum that was booked by the ABECA Literature Organization. ABECA is a young Earth creationist educational think tank that tries to get more people to think the Earth is 6,000 years old through textbooks that ostensibly have the word science written on them, and that is about as far as they actually go. But Republicans love that. You know why they love that? The poorly educated vote for them. The poorly educated very often will vote for Republicans because they are usually the kinds of people who will not look into the ways in which the things that they are voting for will actually affect them. They tend to be more easily persuaded by rhetoric instead of actually learning anything. As a result of that, there's been a concerted effort from the Republican Party to gut the education system. Gut funding from education, for one, but also gut the education system as we understand it so that they can incentivize more people to homeschool. Now, let's ignore the fact that, again, homeschooling is, by its very nature, a fucking poverty trap. If you feel like you have to homeschool your kid instead of letting them go to public school, then you're not able to spend that time going and working yourself. You're spending that time tutoring your child. And if you are trying to handle that while also going and working, you're stressing yourself the fuck out, meaning that you become less effective at both your job and tutoring your child. And by the way, this only really works well when it's a dual parent household, which means if you happen to be a person who was birthed to parents who divorced, I guess fuck you. What's your plan? You don't have one now. Jexmit says, fuck ABECA, I hated those books, they sucked. Trying to deal with that curriculum was like grinding my legs into a paste because my parents didn't want to put much effort into homeschooling. Plus the books suck. Oh yeah, no, ABECA literature is terrible. Anywho, Republicans love homeschooled people because homeschooled people, by and large, tend to not have the social skills compared to people who've been to public school, so that they don't tend to do things like group together and unionize, and they also tend to not be as well educated on the whole because they are way easier to be educated spottily. It is way easier to educate them spottily, rather.
Turning towards Christian schools across the country because they don't want their children being taught these communist and liberal ideas.
Christian schools so that they don't get taught communist ideas. First of all, Jesus was a fucking commie. Let's get that out of the way. Secondly, big important thing here, Miss Leavitt. Gotta go ahead and throw it out there for you, just in case maybe you have forgotten. We don't teach communism at the national level. We also don't teach it at the state level. We don't teach it at all. It's not a thing we do. So, if you're worried about us teaching communism to the children, it's not a thing we fucking do. So, you and Jesse Waters can wank each other off somewhere else.
Down their throat. It's why President Trump in the White House has advocated so strongly for school choice across the country. We want kids to be taught to love our country. They should. It is the greatest country in the history of the world.
All right. I say, if they misbehave, just make all these young kids join the army. Right? Shape them up. I almost had to.
Send them to Cuba.
I almost had to. Oh, you poor little bean. Did you have bone spurs as well, like our president? Oh, man. Also, can we just talk about what that statement really is? If you misbehave, maybe we should send you to die. That's what it is. That's what that statement is. If you misbehave, we should put you in the military where your chances of dying skyrockets. And it's also a propaganda machine. The military, by its very nature, has to break a person down to their fundamentals to make them work in a cohesive unit. And in so doing, tends to propagandize a lot of things about America that are not wholly accurate, because a soldier that believes a lie wholeheartedly is more useful than a soldier who is wary because they know a truth.
Send them to Iran. They'll want to come back real quick.
That's a good point. They can say,
send them to Iran. They'll want to come back real quick. Yeah. You are a kid who we thought did not obey enough, so go die, I guess. Nope. Stupid ass shit.
Hi to the gay Ayatollah. Thank you so much, and welcome back, Karoline.
Hold on, what?
And welcome back, Caroline. I almost had to.
Send them to Cuba. Send them to Iran. They'll want to come back real quick.
That's a good point. They can say hi to the gay Ayatollah. Thank you.
They can say hi to the gay Ayatollah? The gay Ayatollah? Hold on.
So much.
Hold on. Back, I know what's going on. I know what's going on. I got it. This is what he's referring to. Sylvie, thank you for gifting a tier 1 sub. President Trump was stunned to learn last week that U.S. intelligence indicates the new Iranian supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, may be gay, and that his father, the late Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, feared his suitability to rule the Islamic Republic for that reason. Trump couldn't contain his surprise and laughed out loud when he was briefed on the intel. Others in the room also found it hilarious and joined the president's reaction, while one senior intelligence said that they haven't stopped laughing about it for days. So I'm just curious, what's funny about guy is gay? Like, can somebody explain to me what's funny about person is gay? I don't get it. Two of the sources said the intelligence indicated that Mojtaba, who earned the nickname the Power Behind the Robes while serving his aging dad's gatekeeper, has a long-term sexual relationship with his childhood tutor. He's believed to have been wounded in the airstrike, has made aggressive sexual overtures to men caring for him, possibly while under the influence of heavy medication. U.S. spy agencies do not have photographic evidence of his sexual attraction to men. Okay. The sources insisted the tip is solid, with one saying it's derived from the most protected sources that the government has. One of the sources say that the tip is solid. Okay, hold on. No, that's a pun. That's a double entendre. There's no world where that's not a double entendre. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what the joke is. Person is gay. Okay. Guys, I have just been informed that, person is gay is now the height of Republican humor. We are now back in 2005. I am so happy that we never fucking left the COD lobbies. I guess it was the Halo lobbies then. 2007 was when the COD lobbies got real big. Anywho, laziness is not a thing in the way you normally think. Karoline Leavitt's an idiot, Jesse Waters is an idiot, and I didn't realize that being gay was so funny that you'd get an entire group of people around the president laughing, but then again, if Putin were laughing, you'd laugh along with him so that you didn't get shot. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitta, you know I'm not saying that last part, Sylvie Snow, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.